In order to piece together a relevant and competent business plan and puzzle, it often starts with having the necessary and relevant capital to get your business venture off the ground. For some context, let's dive into the numbers. According to the Small Business Administration, there are approximately 34,752,434 small businesses across the country. Small businesses are estimated to employ approximately 45.9% of American workers and account for 43.5% of our gross domestic product, or GDP. Meanwhile, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau reports when it comes to coming up with the capital to start a business, the numbers break down kind of like this. 64.4% use personal or family savings, while 16.5% of entrepreneurs use business loans from banks or other financial institutions. 9.1% use credit cards and 8.7% use personal family assets other than the owner's savings. This is all good food for thought and invaluable institutional knowledge for my friend Chris Hurn. He's a small business lending expert who has testified in front of Congress on small business lending and the vitality of the industry itself. He's also started 2 companies named to the Inc. 500. He is one of the nation's foremost experts in U.S. small business administration, lending, and currently serves as the CEO of Phoenix Lending Services and president of Community Bankshares Incorporated. And finally, he's been featured in a total of 16 different business books. And Hurn joined me this week to have a conversation about the state of small businesses in America, how to gain easy access to capital, and what we need to do from a small business perspective to continue to diversify and strengthen the economy. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Chris, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to learn about your experience in small business lending, my friend. Great to see you, and happy Tuesday to you, my friend.
Thank you. Let's do it.
Absolutely. So, Chris, I wanted to start our conversation by asking you about your opinion on the state of small business lending in America today, and whether you think it's a great time to start a small business, my friend. What are your thoughts there?
I agree with you, Kevin. I think it's a great time for businesses to be created. Technology has transformed starting a business over the last 30 years or so that I've been in the space. You know, it used to cost a lot of money to start a website, for instance, or to have a website that actually sold something. Now you can use AI and create code almost instantaneously so that you can build that website in a matter of, seconds or minutes. You couldn't do that 10, 20, 30 years ago. So that's just a very simple explanation of how things have gotten much, much better. But, there's a lot more financing availabilities. There's just a lot of other options out there that can someone with an idea that wants to go and improve their concept. It's a great time to be able to try and get out there and do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Chris, I know that you are the CEO of Phoenix Lending Services and the president of Community Bankshares, my friend. And I'm curious to know about your personal journey because I know that you've testified before Congress and you've started two companies that have been ranked as two of the top on the Inc. 500 list, my friend. So tell me about your journey, my friend, and what makes it so fabulous.
Well, I started in the small business lending sector in the mid 90s. Grew a little frustrated working for a large corporation at the time and decided to go off on my own and make my own credit decisions. And my first company was called Mercantile Capital, and we were on that list, the Inc. 500 list of America's fastest growing companies, 3 years in a row. And then I later sold that business to a bank and tried to buy it back. And unfortunately, they were selling the bank to a larger bank, so I left and started over. And my last company was called Fountainhead, and we grew that very fast as well. 4 years in a row, we're on that list, and then I had a couple of partners who decided that they wanted to take their gains, their winnings from what I'd earned for them, and kind of go home. They were a hedge fund and asset manager, and so I started a third time, actually, Kevin, and that's what Community Bankshares is doing, which is the holding company for Phoenix Lender Services, Community Bank and Trust, and Thomas Financial Group. And I'm maybe third time's the charm. I'm having more fun than I ever have, and we're running up the ranks of the largest small business lenders in the country. We also do some other government guaranteed lending products for business owners, like we use the USDA Business and Industry product, for instance, is another one. We're the largest lender in that nationally. So we've got a lot of different things that we're working on at the moment. But it's a lot of fun. That's a really, really short version of my background, how I got here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, just talking to you, I'm curious to get your definition of what it means to be resilient in business. Starting over times and doing it successfully, you have to have some level of resilience. So tell me about your definition of business resilience and what that means to you, my friend.
Well, that's a good question, Kevin. I think for me, resilience in part is never giving up. I think it's also learning from your mistakes. You never have a perfect trajectory, up and to the right in terms of success. You're going to have, some bumps along the way. You're going to have some setbacks along the way. But the key, obviously, is always to learn from that and to continue to grow and to continue to pursue whatever your vision is. To me, that's fundamental about being an entrepreneur. I know that perhaps the media or Hollywood might romanticize it, and they like to feel that things are just you kind of get lucky and it's a great lifestyle and all these other things. And the reality is, every entrepreneur that I know, every entrepreneur I finance, certainly my own experiences, we all have these grand visions, but things don't always go according to plan, and you've got to have resilience. You got to have some grit to stick it out, to stick with it, and it takes effort, and it's not for everybody. Being an entrepreneur is not something that I would impose on most people. In fact, I've probably talked a lot of people out of becoming an entrepreneur because there are some highs and some lows. It's truly a roller coaster, and if you don't have that kind of resiliency that you're talking about, Kevin, you're going to be really disappointed, and you might, on the downside, you might just accept failure. And that's not something that successful entrepreneurs generally accept, at least certainly not willingly.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, as you know, there are many different ways you can access small business capital from a lending perspective. So if someone wants to start a small business and they need financing in order to do it, what are some questions they should ask themselves before applying for small business loans and lending, my friend? I'm curious to get your answer there.
Well, I think first of all, it's if it's an idea that has a path to profitability, that's important. And if you want to be a business, if you want to be a nonprofit, it's a different conversation to have. But the key is if you have some innovative product or service, some new thing that you want to bring to market, the fastest that you can prove the concept, the better off you'll be. And what I mean by that is to establish your place in the marketplace, to actually get to a cash flow positive situation. Because it's really hard to keep a business running if you're not making a profit. You gotta be making more than what you're spending. That's pretty fundamental in business. So the sooner you can get to that, the better. I think you've got to be realistic. I can't tell you how many times, Kevin, I see a business plan and someone claims, they're going to have, 1,000% year over year growth from years 1 to year 2. And that's just not realistic. Even the best financed, high tech startups in Silicon Valley very rarely get 1,000% growth from year 1 to year 2, for instance. So I think that's a situation of somebody not being very realistic. People have to understand their marketplace. They have to understand their differentiators. They have to understand there are competitors in your space. Maybe you have something truly new and unique and special, but it won't take very long for your competitors to probably try to duplicate what you're doing. So you have to understand how you compete against others, and that's going to drive your financial model. That's going to drive the assumptions that you have, and where you price things at, what kind of margin you have, how many people can you hire, what does it take to do this, what are your workflows. There's all these sorts of things that, frankly, a lot of this goes in a business plan. And while I've never been a huge advocate of the need to have a perfect business plan that you give to a potential lender or investor, but the sheer activity of going through a business plan itself to put one together forces you to think about some of these things that will make you a better business person when you actually are trying to create something new. So these are some of the things I would suggest. People can be. It really helps to be organized. No lender or investor is going to like it if they ask for documentation and it takes you days or weeks or months to find it. You're going to have to know your business opportunities like the back of your hand. If you don't know the answer, there's no shame in saying I'm not sure just yet. Let me get back to you. I mean, what you don't want to do is make something up or say I don't know. That's not going to be very helpful. But these are some of the things I think a lot of, especially really early stage companies, a lot of us would like to see some skin in the game from the entrepreneur. It's really tough to go get small business lending, capital loans, whether it's from a bank or non-bank credit union, et cetera, if you are a true startup. So you're going to have to probably put some capital in yourself or raise some capital from some others. Oftentimes it's from friends and family to start with. So these are just, some of my thoughts, Kevin, but I mean, there's a lot to this. I mean, we could probably spend an hour just going over that question.
Yeah, so let's break that question into a micro question, Chris.
Okay.
I'm curious to ask you about strategic business smarts and planning.
Okay.
Because a lot of people have great business ideas, but they don't have the strategic sort of acumen in order to turn that profitability. So when you talk about effective business strategic planning, what comes to mind for you, and what do you think entrepreneurs should consider putting together a smart strategic business plan?
Well, it's much of what I just said, which is, the more strategic you are, the more you understand your positioning in the marketplace. It's really difficult to compete when you don't understand what your competitors' strengths and weaknesses are. You don't understand what your own strengths or weaknesses are, for instance. You don't understand how to go get your customers or what your customers are most in need of. I'll give you an example, Kevin. In my world, small business lending, a lot of people think it's all about interest rate. The reality is it's not. It's helpful to have a competitive interest rate, which we certainly do have. We're not always the least expensive. Frankly, I don't want to be the least expensive. I don't want to have a race to the bottom, because I also know many other things go into why someone would want to buy a loan from me, buy money from me. And that is things like repayment terms, for instance, or down payment, for instance, or loan covenants, things, strings attached to the loan. All these other things go into the buying decision that a lot of people don't think about. And it's pretty critical in whatever your industry that you think through the process of how, in fact, you're going to be able to compete against the folks that are trying to do what you do in your industry. So it's those are some of the things I think about strategy that I just think, like I said earlier, there's this romantic notion of being an entrepreneur that sometimes distracts people from really rolling their sleeves up and getting in it and figuring out how are they truly going to survive. And to me, that comes down to strategy. Strategy is very complicated. Strategy has multiple levels.
Yeah, and Chris, I know that you're a fierce champion of small business, and you really believe that small business is the backbone of our economy, and that I'm curious to ask you about creating a great reputation as a small business owner, and how do you think small businesses can continue to evolve to diversify our economy moving forward? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, I think to maintain a good reputation, you've got to do what you say you're going to do. Number one, you have to not be ashamed to admit mistakes, because mistakes are going to happen. I mean, when you have customer service problems, which all of us do at some point, it's okay. It's human to err, right? But as a business owner, you've got to be able to tackle that situation and learn from it and take corrective action going forward. The things like that will enhance your reputation. Being passionate about what you do is really important. Obviously, that's a great motivator, but I think people actually can sort of hear and feel your passion for what you do. So I think that needs to come through as well. I just think reputation is pretty critical. If you want to be an upstanding business and you want to survive over time, then people have to be able to rely upon you. In my world, there's people that take a good faith deposit or a fee up front to get a loan, and then they go bye-bye. Nobody ever hears from them again. It only takes doing that once or twice before you have a terrible reputation, and hopefully people don't contemplate doing business with you again. I've also had a situation where someone's given me a good faith deposit to get a loan, and we use that money to pay for third-party reports, which the borrower obviously then owns. And I've had to give those monies back before if the deal falls apart. Maybe the seller pulled the contract at the end or something like that. I've had people that I've given the money back to that then call me in a year or 2 or 5 later to do another project. And the reason they did that is because I treated them well. I treated them like I would have wanted to be treated. So I think, just like in our personal life, treating people well, like we want to be treated, extends into our business lives. And that's how you, be thought of as an upstanding business. I think that's really critical.
Yeah, and Chris, my next 2 questions have to do with statistical data. And the first one, my friend, I'm going to ask you about the stability of small businesses and financing, because according to the Federal Reserve Bank and the Small Business Credit Survey, they reported this year that a staggering 59% of small businesses report being in fair or poor financial condition. So I'm curious, what do you think about when you hear those numbers, and how can we work to put more small businesses on a more profitable and prosperous financial future? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, I'm not entirely shocked by that statistic because Lord knows I look at enough business owners' financials daily, and sometimes I get balance sheets that don't balance. For instance, that's always kind of ironic when we see that. I think some of it comes down to financial education. Frankly, we used to in the States, we used to teach civics, for instance. We don't teach civics anymore. We also used to teach home ec. That doesn't happen anymore. It's not common, I guess. There's a smaller percentage of society that goes into being entrepreneurs than other segments, and yet folks don't necessarily get taught certain things in that realm. I mean, I know that colleges and universities over the last couple of decades have started to have, courses in entrepreneurship and majors and minors in entrepreneurship. And that's fine for things like, bookkeeping and finances and things like that. I encourage people to do that sort of thing, but there's also aspects of being an entrepreneur that are not teachable. Either you have that resiliency gene, like we talked about earlier, or you don't. Either you believe passionately in your idea and have said no to all the naysayers who think you're crazy, or you don't. And that's why entrepreneurship is not something for the faint of heart. So I think that's probably part of it. I think not enough entrepreneurs probably understand the dynamic of what's their highest and best use of their time, and by that I mean sometimes it's okay to outsource some of these things. Having an outsourced CFO, for instance, or bookkeeper is perfectly fine if accounting is not your strong suit, for instance, and probably if whatever it is your business is, you're probably much better at that and make a higher per minute or per hour rate than you actually doing your own books. I mean, I'm not saying everybody can do that. They may not have the ability to outsource some of these things, but I oftentimes see business owners, especially in their early days, trying to do everything, trying to be in every box of the organizational chart. And that's tough to do long term. Entrepreneurs have to, at some point, as the business matures, they have to remove themselves from a lot of those boxes of the org chart. They've got to be okay with hiring somebody who maybe only does 70 or 80% as good as what you do, to replace you so that you can focus on the bigger picture, so that you can focus on what's the highest and best use of your time and how you move the enterprise forward. It's really tough to grow a business if you're the only one doing everything. You won't be able to do it. You'll plateau at some point. So I don't know. I'm kind of rambling here, Kevin, thinking about this question. It's a great question. I don't have all the answers. I'd certainly like to see us teach more of this stuff, because it would enable a lot of entrepreneurs to get through some of the bumpier periods at the beginning once they initially launch their business.
Chris, I used to work for the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and one of the signs that hung in my office was that collaboration is the key to progress, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Absolutely. Collaboration solves a lot of issues out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, I'm also curious to get your thoughts on this because Gallup released a report this year that said 6 in 10 Americans want to start their own business for the financial freedom and the idea of being their own boss, and they're willing to take on financial risk in order to do that, my friend. So I'm curious, what comes to mind when you hear those statistics, and are you surprised by so many people wanting to be their own bosses these days, my friend?
Well, I'm not surprised because, again, I go back to this. We've romanticized the notion of being your own boss, being an entrepreneur. But I don't think a lot of people really have a deep appreciation for the struggles that that'll often entail. We need entrepreneurs in our society who will take these educated risks for the hope for returns, and it can be tough. I'm guilty of this myself. I remember years ago when I started my first company, I told my wife, "Oh, it's going to be great. I'm going to be my own boss. I'll set my own hours." All the usual platitudes that people claim. And guess what? When you're your own boss, I hate to break it to people, but you oftentimes work harder than everybody else in your business.
Mm-hmm.
That's oftentimes the fact. So, but you will probably enjoy what you do so much more than working for someone else, and perhaps that's the magic. It doesn't feel like work quite as much if you're doing something that you enjoy, that you feel like is making impact, and that you're really doing well at. That's the key when you're an entrepreneur. So I'm not surprised. I just sometimes question. Does somebody really have it in their soul to go out and start a company and be willing to do what it takes to overcome those downturns, those inevitable downturns, because it will happen in every business.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, what do you think it means to empower the future of us small businesses? And what do you think it takes to succeed in today's business climate?
How do they? Well, I mean, I think empowering business owners means trying to give them the tools, making them available for them to succeed. Sometimes it might mean coaching. It might mean things like what I do with government guaranteed lending, whether it's SBA or USDA, to provide better terms and conditions on our loans than what you could get from ordinary conventional banking. The reason why we do that is because we want to try and help entrepreneurs succeed. And sometimes, well, not sometimes, oftentimes, traditional banking does not finance startup businesses, does not like to finance businesses that are in rural markets or other underserved areas. That's just a fact of life, and so that's part of the reason why I'm involved in public-private partnerships with doing government guaranteed lending for those folks, because we want to see those people survive and thrive. So. I think we just need to understand that there's a lot of options out there to help business owners. They have to avail themselves of it. Okay, they've got to look into it. They've got to do the research. They've got to do the time, spend the effort into it. But there's a lot of that out there, and unfortunately, I think sometimes business owners kind of put on blinders and don't look at some of the opportunities that exist out there for them. I do think again, back to your earlier comment, why entrepreneurship, I think, it's much easier to start a business these days is because of so many of these different tools and options that are available, which were not available 40, 50 plus years ago. So I still think it's a great time to start a business, but you've got to be very, very purposeful about what you do and how you do it.
Yeah, and I know, Chris, that you're passionate about helping business owners understand the next steps in their business and unlocking hidden potential and opportunities. So, with that in mind, Chris, I'm curious to get your thoughts on what it means to be a forward-thinking business owner today. What do you think that means to you?
Well, the first thing it means to me, Kevin, I think is that there are always areas ripe for improvement. You have to have sort of a constant improvement mindset. I feel like the moment you go, okay, fine, I've really licked that problem. There's nothing else I can do to get better at that particular thing. That's usually when that complacency sets in, and it's just a matter of time before fate kind of beats you over the head a little bit. So I think you have to, and that's what being an entrepreneur. That's why it's tough, right? If you're going to be a successful entrepreneur, then the learning never stops, the improvements never stop. It's constant. But that's how you become a forward-thinking person. That's how you try to stay on the cutting edge. That's how you try to be as innovative as possible. If you just want to be I don't want to pick on a particular industry here, Kevin. I'm not going to do that. But I just think it's really important that you have this mindset of constantly searching for ways to improve. I think that's key. That's how I think a forward-thinking entrepreneur is. They're constantly thinking of ways to improve. And if they may not have all the answers, but they'll look around for it. They'll try to find the answers. They'll also, they'll listen to answers from their people or their friends, or they'll witness what somebody does in their industry, or better yet, they'll witness what somebody's doing outside of their industry that they may be able to apply to their particular industry. Just, it's a constant effort of trying to get better at what you're doing. That's what forward thinking people do.
Yeah, and Chris, I'm also curious to ask you about your perspective on the role of people with disabilities, my friend, because I believe that starting a small business is a great way for folks with disabilities to experience and achieve prosperity, my friend. So how do you think we can create more advantageous conditions within the small business sector to entice folks with disabilities to start a small business? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, again, you said something a while ago about resilience. And to me, if someone has a disability, they're faced with resiliency every day. They can either sit there and let whatever the disability is sort of dictate things, or they can continue to push forward. They can try to live the life on their terms. I think there's no reason why someone with a disability couldn't be a business owner. In fact, I know numerous people that have disabilities are business owners. Frankly, from a mental disability, sometimes we get caught up in some of these things, and something like an ADHD, for instance. Some people think of that as a disability. I actually think that's a superpower. I know so many entrepreneurs that are classified as ADHD. It can be difficult sometimes, of course, but it can also be, if they manage it correctly, it can be something that really turbocharges their abilities to be successful at things. So I don't know. I feel like, Kevin, that there's not as much. I guess I would say I don't think there's, as a society, I don't think we frown upon folks with disabilities like maybe they did generations ago. So I think there's more of an openness to it. And all the tools that we're talking about, all the opportunities that we're talking about, they're available to anybody with a disability, just like they would be to someone who doesn't have a disability. So yeah, I'd love to see more and more people. Doesn't, whether they're disability or otherwise. As you know, I'm a huge champion of entrepreneurship. I'd love to see just more people get into having their own business, starting their own business, and thriving. I think there's I don't think there ought to be limits to it. Sometimes people are their own worst enemy. They create their own limits themselves. And if you want to be successful as an entrepreneur, you have to constantly push. So I think if you've succeeded as someone that maybe had a disability, then that suggests to me that that's someone that's is not willing to just let an obstacle stand in their way, and they probably have the right DNA to be a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, I've got a trio of questions left for you, and I'm gonna combine in my next one because
Okay.
it coincides with each other. So I'm curious, Chris, to ask you about the role of the U.S. government and their role in sort of stimulating small business opportunities for consumers today. And what role do you think the tariffs play in the conditions for people to start a small business? So what are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, I think the back in the 1950s, the U.S. government created the Small Business Administration, and it's the only federal agency in America that has business in its name, and its sole mission is to help small businesses thrive in this country. And they were pretty brilliant in how they came up with this and coming up with a true public-private partnership, meaning the government is helping the private sector lenders take perhaps larger risks on their borrowers in return for sharing some of that risk, meaning the borrowers and the lenders. This is what a lot of people don't understand about SBA lending. The borrowers and the lenders actually pay guarantee fees to the government, and that those fees kind of go into, we'll call it kind of like an insurance reserve, that it's meant to offset loans that get charged off, that go into liquidation. And I would say that most of the last 15 years, these programs have operated at not just a zero subsidy, but actually a negative subsidy, which means they're actually been profitable for the U.S. government. So these are the kinds of programs that if we could replicate this in other places in the government, it's really good business. It's good business for the U.S. taxpayers. And most importantly, as you pointed out earlier, small businesses create the bulk of new jobs in America. Small businesses are almost half of the United States payroll. So small businesses are creating a lot of tax revenue for the government. They're having a huge economic impact on society, on the GDP and whatnot. And so I think it makes a lot of sense that the U.S. government is involved in this space. I know there's some detractors or some people that would say that the U.S., the government has no role in some of this. And I would just say, look, if we can move society forward by these efforts, if we can create more income on the taxes from the success of these businesses, and it pays for itself, actually produces a surplus for the government, those are programs we want to see more of. So that's why I think the government is involved. And frankly, I've been asked to talk to other governments around the world about how they can replicate what we've done in America with our SBA. I'd like to see more of that involvement. In terms of the other question you asked about tariffs, so tariffs is an interesting thing. Tariffs are basically a tax, as you know, Kevin, and I think it's the position of the current U.S. president, the administration, that America for a long time has been paying extra taxes to other countries to have our goods and services imported into other countries, and yet we have not charged much to have those another country's goods and services brought into America. And America, like it or not, has been sort of the world's policeman for the last, basically since World War II. And I think that's the position of this current administration, that we want to, it's not so much that we don't like free trade as we want to have a little more fair trade. And we're in a unique position because, of course, the U.S. gross domestic product is made up of about 70% by U.S. citizens, U.S. consumers. So we're not quite as dependent on other countries as, say, those in Europe, for instance, who are much more dependent on other countries to support their gross domestic product. So it's kind of a unique situation. I think that the president is trying to rebalance things a little bit. But this can be problematic for small businesses. I mean, if you're a small business that does most of your revenue within this country, within America, then you're obviously not going to be that affected by tariffs. If you're a small business that's maybe an e-commerce business that has a product that's made in China, for instance, you're going to be very impacted by tariffs, for instance. So it's not uniform. It really depends on what your business is. But I think the point behind all of this is, I think everybody would agree, everyone would like to have free and fair trade. It's just not always been that way. So you're always going to have some difficulty as you try to rebalance that. And I think that's what we're going through right now globally is trying to figure out a way to make things a little fairer, a little more free all across the board. Because, look, I don't like taxes. I've never met a tax I didn't like. So I'd like to see fewer taxes because that allows people to keep more of what they earn, and it allows a small business to reinvest their profits and to grow faster and further. So anything we can do to get rid of taxes, I'm all for. But I think sometimes you've got to institute some, to play the long game and try to get to a fair taxation situation. So I think that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, I'm curious to end our conversation with another two-part question because I think they're interconnected too. Forbes came out this year with a study this year, Chris, that discovered that as we entered 2025, access to capital to start small business and lending was the top concern for small businesses and entrepreneurs alike. And over 63% of small business owners use either their own capital or capital for family members to start a business. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on the fact that small business capital and lending continues to be a top priority and concern for business owners. And how do you think this discussion contributes to your own legacy, my friend? Because I know you're a champion, as you mentioned, of small business and small business lending. So tell me, how do you think this overall discussion contributes to your own legacy as well? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think access to capital has always been a concern in the entrepreneurial community. It's really difficult to achieve your dreams, your visions, if you have to grow organically. It's obviously the purpose of getting debt capital or even equity capital for that matter. The purpose is to fuel your growth, to do it better, faster. And so in the absence of that, you're going to fundamentally have slower growth. You're not going to be able to do quite as much. And so that's why, back to what I said earlier, Kevin, about making sure that you know your margins, that you are profitable, that you're cash flow positive. That's really important because you don't want to take on debt and that doesn't actually benefit your growth, your profitable growth. You need to, if you take on debt, you have to make sure that you're profitable so you can repay that debt and you don't make a bigger problem. You don't make a problem bigger, basically. So, but I'm not surprised. We live in a society where we finance a lot of things. Starting a business is no different, right? Credit is fairly readily available. And it serves a major function in terms of, like I said, pushing society forward. We're able to do more. We're able to grow faster and further as a result of having access to reasonable capital. So, I don't see that changing much. I also know that bank consolidation also impacts this. We've gone in America. We've gone from 20 years ago. We had roughly 15,000 banks. Now we're at around 4,500 banks in America. A lot of other large first world countries have a handful of banks, for instance, and so when you have that much consolidation, you are going to have concerns about access to capital because, let's face it, the traditional lending industry is not always as favorable to small businesses or rural businesses or whatnot. So, it doesn't surprise me. In terms of my legacy, look, I feel like what I do, it's an honor and a privilege to be able to finance other entrepreneurs. I'm an entrepreneur myself, as you know, Kevin. And so, I feel like this is my higher calling to put my whole heart and soul into this. What we do, my whole team feels this way. It's one of my, kind of my culture tests of someone to join us. I want to make sure they're as equally passionate about doing what we do as I am. So I just, I would love to finance. I've often said this. I want to finance as many healthy small businesses as I possibly can. It's kind of like, the Bill Gates quote from the early 80s. He wanted to have a PC on every desk in America. My view is I want to try to help as many healthy small business owners as I can. And I say healthy, meaning profitable. I'm not going to be able to help an unhealthy business. I'm not going to be able to save a business that's losing money hand over fist. Well, I shouldn't say I'm not going to be able to. I'm rarely going to be able to save them, and that's why I focus my efforts on people that are succeeding, that are doing well, but can do better and can be bigger, and they can be today's acorns that are tomorrow's oak trees. That's what I like to do. That's what I want to be a part of, and play my small role in doing this. And that's what gets me excited, and that's why I keep doing this. And like I said earlier, this is my third time in this industry now, and 25 years of starting a company, being its CEO, and it's always been to finance entrepreneurs. And I'm going to do this as long as I possibly can, Kevin, because it's I find it really rewarding and really exciting.
Well, if you find something you're passionate about, you don't work a day in your life, right?
That's what they say. Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. And Chris, finally tell me, if people want to get connected with the great work that you're doing, my friend, what's the most effective and efficient way they can do that?
They can go to our websites, communitybankshares.com, Phoenix, actually phxbusiness.com for phoenixbusiness.com. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just look me up, Chris Hurn, Hurn. My email is churn@communitybankshares.com. So it looks like churn at communitybankshares.com, or just Google me. You'll see I'm regularly quoted in articles and media. I write a lot of articles. I do a lot of podcasts. I'm a guest on. So there's a lot of information out there, and would love to hear from someone. And if I can help finance you or someone then by all means reach out. Happy to help.
Well, fabulous, Chris. I think you're doing great work to continue down the road of business prosperity for yourself and other entrepreneurs alike, my friend. I want to thank you for engaging in conversation and for the great work that you're doing to promote entrepreneurship, and for joining me this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
Thank you for having me, Kevin. I appreciate it.